John, thank you for coming, and we're really excited to hear about your story. And I would love to start with some of your background. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? And where did you go to college?
Grew up in Bethesda, Bethesda, Chevy Chase area. Didn't go to college. Chose kind of a different path. Just kind of knew what I wanted to do. Background was odd. Started out as a mechanic. Kind of grew into basically being an engineer, and went from there. Just
I know your dad's in the house, so I want to ask him later.
And mom, yeah.
And your mom too. I want to ask your parents what they felt like when John came in and said, "Hey guys, I'm not going to college."
Yeah.
What was their reaction?
So happy. They weren't so happy.
Right.
Yeah.
So what were you doing? I mean, what did you want to do that was more compelling than going to college? Because that's not a traditional path, at least on the East Coast. It might be in Silicon Valley.
Montgomery County native, right? There's not exactly a lot of racing here. I wanted to work in Formula One. I wanted to really be on the forefront of innovation, however possible. And frankly, over all of my careers or businesses, that's exactly kind of been the common theme, is just chasing the forefront of innovation wherever that could be, right? It started out kind of mechanically, then it went into financial vehicles and real estate investments, and now into intellectual property, blockchain, and crypto.
So connect the dots for us. You're an inventor. You've been involved in over 15,000 inventions. You have close to 1,000 that you've been personally involved in. But connect the dots between sort of becoming an auto mechanic and then becoming this inventor. Like, how did you make that? Or have you always been curious about things?
Well, yeah. So when I was working on cars, the reason I kind of had more of a, I don't know, maybe a meteoric rise in the mechanic space was that I kept coming up with new tools, new ways of fixing these cars, and it got noticed, right? It got noticed pretty quickly. Originally by BMW, then BMW Motorsport, Porsche Motorsport, Lamborghini, Volkswagen, Audi Group, several other things. But effectively, I just figured out the way to fix the problems and solve the problems, or put the puzzles together a lot faster. In racing, though, racing's an industry that most people don't realize is very unique. In racing, we would come up with a new technology, a new invention, a new idea. We would prototype that invention. Actually, that's where 3D printing, it was originally called rapid prototyping. We would prototype that idea, we'd test that idea, we would build an end product, and we'd have it in the consumer's hands in about the lifespan of a day. And we did that almost every day for about 15 years. So these aren't, little $500,000 or $250,000 cars. These are $250 million cars that we would build, 5 or 10 of them a year. They're the best of the best engineers. In fact, some companies have spun out of them, like SpaceX and Tesla, for instance, spun out of USF1, which was a Formula One team that Elon couldn't afford. And that's where a lot of this technology has come from. In fact, most of the aerospace people, and I saw a few aerospace people here, most of NASA, as well as a lot of the aerospace industries, will hire back and forth between racing, especially Formula One. They're some of the best engineers in the world. They're extremely innovative.
Right. So you were lucky to be around these geniuses, and at some point in your development or in your career, you started a couple of early successes, right? You want to talk about that? Before Loci, you had a couple of businesses that you did?
Yeah, so I started pretty early, actually, just working on cars in my mom's driveway, which I'm sure she's got plenty of stories to tell about. But I think at one point I even set the driveway on fire accidentally. But yeah, then she loves to tell a story where she came downstairs one day and I had like maybe 70 tires, race tires, stacked in the basement, on carpet, mind you, and had a big sheet of glass set out and was discovering what carbon fiber basically was, making the first components that I made, just with sheets of glass and curing on top of the washer and dryer. And then, kind of kind of kept going from there and started making some carbon fiber components and engineering a few different things and designing some other components for race cars. Then I was expecting the birth of my daughter, needed to move home. Racing, you travel a lot. And I said, well, I'm really good at building stuff like this. Maybe I can build something else that keeps me home. And that was houses. So got into real estate investment, contracting, things like that, flipping houses.
And then, so you were chugging along here, and you decided to start this company, Loci. What was the pain point that you had identified, and the inspiration behind you starting the company before you got involved in the ICO, but just at the beginning of Loci, which was about 10 years ago?
Yeah. It was right around 2008. So basically, my dad and I felt really dejected about how many great engineers, inventors, people all over the world that were coming up with really fantastic technologies just ended up getting bogged down and stifled by the way that the enterprises were, as well as the patent system. There were all these really fantastic technologies and ideas that never really made it to market. I saw this firsthand by being in racing. We had maybe 10,000, 5 to 10,000 or so inventions a year, but because of competitive advantage, we never wanted to lose any of that. We never wanted to file patents for anything, so we never wanted to disclose any of it. I felt really dejected about that and said, okay, look, we got to do something.
So you said there's this massive thousands of awesome ideas that are just not coming to market. They're sitting and they're dying.
I figured billions at the time.
Billions, right.
We've confirmed it by now, yeah. That it's. I think we're at something like a 3% yield of inventions actually coming through the patent system, and of that, there's another 1% that actually makes through from patent to successful product. Mm-hmm. When you really do the math, you're looking at about 3.25 million patents a day, or inventions a day, that actually exist. And then when you've got a compounding effect on top of that, you're looking at hundreds of billions of inventions.
Right, like everyone in this room has multiple ideas every week, right?
Yeah.
So that's very conceivable. So you wanted to do this Wikipedia of Ideas, right? So that's a pretty grand ambition, right? You wanted to catalog.
Well, I mean, Wikipedia had already existed, so it wasn't really that grand. Right. But we basically wanted to just say, okay, look, anybody that has an invention that doesn't think that they have the ability to bring it to market, to file a patent, whatever else, we'll just open source that, right? We'll just get those inventions out there and make it so that somebody else can build on top of that. That was an issue, but not because people actually, what we originally thought would be the problem was that people didn't want to share their ideas.
Right.
That actually wasn't the case. The case, the real systemic flaw was that when an inventor comes up with a new technology, he or she also names that technology. And if the inventor names that technology, they're the only one in the world that has the keyword for that technology. So how do they or anybody else discover that invention has already existed, right? You end up having this duplicative effort of inventing the same thing twice or hundreds of times in some cases. It ends up leading to a large amount of waste, something like $40 trillion a year in waste. So we kept going down that rabbit hole and said, okay, well, where's it going to lead to?
So you discovered another pain point, which is that you have all these ideas, but they all have different names. So what did you do to solve that?
So we developed something called fuzzy concept mapping, and I can go into the whole patent, or everybody can read it. It's about 897 pages. It's a nice short bathroom break.
One of the largest ever filed, right?
Yeah, I think it's still one of the largest in the U.S., maybe still the largest patent in the U.S., which isn't necessarily a compliment, by the way. That's not exactly a good thing. But what that effectively is we discovered something called contextual derivation and created something called contextual derivation. And effectively, we figured out a way to discover and determine what something fundamentally does based on the way it's searched, right? So as opposed to a wheel, which has no actual context around what a wheel does. It doesn't say anything about rolling. It doesn't say anything about its shape. It doesn't say anything about its structure. Instead of searching for things like that, right, most inventors will actually search for a round rolling thing. You really can't find that. And when everybody has a chance, by the way, I prompt you to go on Google and try searching for a wheel using round rolling thing. Good luck. By the way, if you find it, please don't click on it because it kind of messes up the example. But
Right. So you have this kind of simple, sounds like, right, Venn diagram process where you put in a few descriptive words and then it kind of coalesces around a set of potential inventions or ideas, right?
yeah, exactly. So it's the Venn diagram. The name of it's called InVenn. The Venn diagram is just a really simple way to do a do-it-yourself patent search, but it really can be any search, and it's effectively 4 keyword searches, just the same way that you would do Google or anything like that. But it's 4 Google searches done at the same time. Whereas instead of producing a list of results and multiple pages of it, all the results get populated into a circle that's tied to each search, right? And then those circles overlay together to create a Venn diagram. Thus, the things that are in the overlaps amongst all 4 of the circles are the most relevant results.
Right. And so let's say Harley and I both have the same invention, and he might be a year ahead of me, and someone over there does a search, and then a set of results come up and our results are both up there. In a patent process, usually time in, right? The first one in. How does it work on the Loci platform? Like who gets the credit?
We're going to get into the weeds on some of the specifics. But in a nutshell, the first one to discover the novelty will still get it, right?
Okay.
They'll be able to stake an invention on a blockchain, but that's a little bit further down the road. Let me just say, we're not patent agents, we're not patent attorneys, we're not a patent office, we don't offer any legal advice, we don't file any patents or anything along those lines. All we are is a vehicle to be able to eventually buy and sell the IP, but also really just be able to have an interface with the blockchain to be able to stake inventions there and to be able to search very quickly. I say all that we are, that's kind of a complicated process.
So the next question is, how do you guys make money? Like, what's your revenue model look like? And
so we sell this subscription for the patent searching tool. We sell it for $250 per user per month. And we group everybody with attorneys, right? Because again, we're not a patent agent. But anybody that comes in gets tied up to an attorney. They can choose a different one. They can choose their own if they'd like. So if there are any IP attorneys in here, it's a free affiliate program. I'd love to talk with you. But yeah, so we do that as well. Then on the other side, it's a pretty good quantitative analysis platform for trading. That's really on an equities and commodities basis. That's a bit further down the road.
so as a inventor or as a songwriter or a poet or a book writer or an article writer, all those assets can go into the platform, right? And what's my incentive to do it? Am I going to get money out of it? How do I monetize my idea?
That's where it gets pretty exciting. So the real problem, I think, globally was twofold with IP. One, it's really, really, really slow. And 2, it's very expensive. So, an inventor or a musician, anybody, whether it's trademarks, copyrights, patents, anything along those lines, to go through the whole process, it's extremely expensive. I think right now we're at about $130,000 is the average cost to file a patent, although I'm sure I'll get beaten up by somebody. I believe that's the global average. And I think it's about 5 years right now to get a patent back, or at least to get the first office action. For trademarks, it's a lot faster. It's a lot shorter. But with a platform like this, we're able to do something called a public disclosure. the very act of doing the search ends up enabling an inventor to be able to stake their invention on the blockchain if they'd like at their choice, at their discretion. But they can stake the invention on a blockchain, and blockchain is a way to immutably store any sort of document, any data set, anything along those lines. It stores the timestamp on this blockchain and effectively gives at least people in the US a 1-year period, grace period, to file a non-provisional patent. What I'm basically saying is that by using a system like this incorporated with blockchain, we can take the patent process from what would have been many years to theoretically down to a matter of minutes. But where it gets really exciting is that with cryptocurrency, we can exchange and buy and sell IP internationally as well, which effectively ends up crowdsourcing R&D for any enterprise, bank, or inventor, right? So anybody in the U.S. can buy IP or even an invention, an idea from somebody in the Ukraine, from Brazil, from Russia, Hong Kong, wherever. It doesn't really matter. For us, all that really matters is the novelty. All that really matters is what is in the system. So,
right. That's fantastic. What you guys are doing, and how did you come up with the idea of doing an initial coin offering? Like, at what stage did you say, "Hey, I want to create an ecosystem where there's a utility token or currency that my buyers and sellers can use to transact business? Why not do it in fiat currency, dollars or something else? Why do a token offering?"
Yeah, so a couple of things. So we had done 2 equity rounds prior to doing the token sale. The technical term for an ICO, by the way, is a token generation event, but it's just because, frankly, if it quacks like a duck, sometimes you try to avoid making some of the regulators upset. But for us, really, the biggest problem with IP in general, regarding the currency side or the exchange side, is the valuation. The valuation metrics for IP are extremely speculative. I've heard from even some really large analysts and auditors that some of their margins of error are upwards of 90%. 90% margin of error on IP. It's extremely subjective, speculative in general. When you get into international as well, you get different languages, you get different contexts of speech, you have all these other issues. It's through the roof. With the crypto, what was really neat about it was we now had a global currency that we were able to have kind of the same uniform valuation across. And then we had to have a valuation metric that was crowd-derived to be able to buy and sell these. It'll get a little bit esoteric to explain the valuation metric, but in a nutshell, we're going to be able to effectively predict how many permutations of any invention there can be, how many innovation opportunities there will be. And in knowing the number, we can basically say if there are going to be 1,000 inventions of X, the first one is worth 1,000 coin at a purely relative value. It doesn't matter what the market opportunity is, and the last one is worth 1 coin, right? So with a purely relative system like that, the market opportunity doesn't need to be analyzed. You don't need to analyze what the exchange rates are of the currencies, right? You don't need to understand what the competition's going to be or the litigation potential or anything of these 3,500 plus variables for measuring the valuation. It was a really big problem to figure that out.
Right. Was that more of a driver, the utility piece, or was it raising the capital?
The capital wasn't a driver at all for us. We had already raised capital in 2 previous rounds. It really was just the perfect use case. In my eyes, first of all, blockchain is not really that new of a concept. It is computationally, but when you really think about what's an immutable store of documents that is open sourced, auditable, and public, well, the title and deed process has been that way for thousands of years, right? Intellectual property really isn't all that different, right? It was just the perfect use case for blockchain, and then adding in that layer of cryptocurrency just made a lot more sense.
And you think you might be the first successful ICO with such a congruent use case, is that right?
Successful? I don't know. I mean, that's kind of subjective, but we are definitely the first proven utility token. Yeah, we're the first company to have launched with an existing product that had sales. We're the first company to have done an ICO that had, or a token sale that had an equity round. Looks like we'll probably be the first token sale to do an equity round after. We're getting ready to raise a growth equity round now. There were a lot of things. We definitely were the first company to have ever accepted tokens for an actual product. There are a lot of things.
And you talk about raising extra. You're doing another round. What are you going to use it for, and how do they value the business? Because you almost have two. You have a dual valuation methodology where you have the ICO valuation and you have the business itself.
Yeah, the valuation metrics are really complicated for a post token sale raise. Do you want me to get into
a little bit? I think we have a lot of people that are interested in raising money.
How many people here have done valuations, 409As, things like that, or are in finance? Okay, most people, most of the investors. So right now we're working on what will be the standard for valuation metrics for a post token sale equity raise. The biggest.
Is this going to be one of the first ones?
It is literally the first one.
The first company to raise.
Have never been done.
So you're the first company to raise private equity after an ICO.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Congrats.
Yeah. So one of the biggest issues here is in determining what is recurring, what is deferred revenue, and what is sort of non-recurring deferred revenue in the first place. So we're all raising capital. Anybody that's done a token sale is raising capital for utility tokens, right? Hence, suggesting that it has utility and it is deferred revenue. It is sales of the product, pre-sales of the product. Whether it's crowdfunding, token sale, it doesn't really matter. You're getting deferred revenue. Typically, fiat doesn't appreciate that much, right? In this case, though, you can just about expect a 3x appreciation on the underlying currency that you've taken in, as well as the underlying value of the sales of the product, right? So if you can think of it this way, it's like selling a bunch of new razors or something on Kickstarter, and then the razors tripling or quadrupling in value, as well as the money that you took in also is tripling in value. So the argument is currently being made that you're taking in this capital as deferred revenue that's non-reoccurring. However, you can do a recurring revenue multiplier based on the secondary market trading volume, as well as some of the trading markets of the underlying currency that you accepted in, whether it be Bitcoin, ETH, or whatever else. So we're working with some of the big four here to actually finalize and devise these metrics. But it looks like probably about a 3 to 5x on secondary market trading volume, which would count towards your EBITDA as recurring revenue. It's complex.
Sounds very complex. Do the private equity investors understand that?
Well, I think everybody understands a multiplier on EBITDA. Just about every investor in this room is going to know exactly what a multiplier is. But getting the right multiplier, in San Francisco or the Bay Area or whatever else, the multipliers are kind of liquid here. You're like, oh yeah, I'm a 10x today, and tomorrow I'm a 15x on EBITDA. Oh, yeah, good luck with that, right? DC.
And what are you using the capital for? You have more development? You're gonna
there are a lot of things. So we'd like to go after some licensing opportunities for our IP. We really want to push towards the researchers, tech transfer offices. We need to push the sales efforts as well. There's some infringement suits that I think we need to protect against. Or go after. I shouldn't say protect, but.
And we had talked. We did a nice Facebook Live video a few weeks ago, and one question I asked was, "What's your sort of end goal with this thing? Do you want to do an IPO?" And you said something pretty bold.
Yeah.
So you're not going to do an IPO because if you do your job right.
Yeah, the IPO market will be dead. If we do our job right,
what do you mean by that?
Market will
exactly.
Be dead. Well, okay. So a couple of things. If you really think about what an idea is. An idea is what the product will end up turning into, right? It's just about every product. In fact, if we break down, GDP for a minute, the sum of all money changing hands here, you've got products, goods, and services. Services are a fairly small portion, about 15% or so. And that's largely banking, finance, legal, things like that. Goods, largely livestock, agriculture, textiles, another, say, 12 to 15%. Products take up the lion's share of all money changing hands. Well, the products are broken down into 3 sections as well. The materials needed to actually build a product, the companies or the execution to actually put the thing together, market it, sell it, right? And then lastly, the idea of what it is. When you think about this, though, the materials are traded over commodities markets, right? The execution, that's traded over an equities market. But where are the ideas traded? Right? And better yet, if you know what ideas are going to be coming out, if you know what products are going to be coming out over the next, say, 8 years or so, don't you also know what materials are going to be needed to build those ideas? And if you are watching the open ledger on a blockchain, it's all open, it's all auditable for anybody to see. Don't you also know what companies are buying them and potentially be able to short both markets? So if we do our job right, not only will we kill the equities markets, but we'll kill all commodities, equities, and every
But the
index.
ideas still need capital to come to market, right? So how are they going to get capital?
Well, they're getting capital through the token, right? They're getting capital by literally buying and selling their ideas in volume through our platform.
Right.
What
do you consider? Do you consider yourself a fintech company, or, I don't want to box you, but you're talking about really disintermediating the financial markets, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully
So you're a fintech company.
That's what we're supposed to do, isn't it? I think as humans we're kind of supposed to disrupt things and push the envelope. Yeah, I'd say that we're a cross between fintech and intellectual property, maybe, or fintech and legal, somewhere in there.
All right. So we did put the ask some of our audience for questions ahead of time, and Shahid Shah, who's one of our speakers today, had a question for you. He said, what was the hardest part of your token definition for Loci, and what are some lessons you learned that would make our task of evaluating an ICO strategy easier?
From the investor standpoint or from the entrepreneur standpoint? Entrepreneur standpoint. Okay. So what's going to analyze and help you understand what to and not do, what to do and what not to do? One, legal, right? Start with that. It's really hard. It's a shifting landscape all the time. You really have to do your research first and foremost. Second of all, don't assume that you're going to raise the capital just because it's a token sale. It's really hard to do, especially with the marketing expenditure. You need a lot of marketing. You need a lot of PR. You need a lot of public outreach. 3, don't expect any sleep for the next year. This is a market that never closes, okay? And you will never see it coming when China decides to just go crazy, or Singapore, or regulation in Russia, or anything else. You'll never see it coming. It'll happen in what seems like the early night. So get prepared to travel around the world. I think I did something like 47 countries in the last 6 months. More than that, get really good advisors that are actually going to help with the business. This industry/market is rife with advisors that just get a handout. They get just paid to come and get their name on it. And don't get me wrong, you need a couple of those, but the operators are really the key. Lastly, try to do everything you can to not be emotional. It's really, really, really hard. This space is filled with trolls and just like the most mean schoolyard tactics of all time. It's gonna feel like a kick and punch to the gut when you see your price drop or anything else, or when you don't hit the cap or whatever. It's okay. Just stay the course, build what you need to do, and prove them all wrong.
And building on that question, we have Raj Sharma here, who is also speaking today. Raj asks, what would you change based on lessons learned from your ICO?
I would have gone in with both feet. Would have spent a lot more money on marketing and PR, especially the marketing. The problem with that is the regulation. You don't know what you can and cannot talk about legally because there hasn't been any real regulation. And there's a reason. Actually, my GC is even here. My general counsel is here for a reason. She's going to stand up and yell redact as soon as I say something bad. Objection! So it's a changing landscape. You really don't know what you can and can't talk about. You just need to do what seems like the right thing. And to go back to the last question as well, don't assume that anybody that's done this before has ever done it right. Most of them are wrong. If anybody has done a model, with the exception of me, of course, but if anybody has done a model, you probably shouldn't trust it. For one, it's still not really a capitalistic structure. We still don't really have enough competition in each of the spaces, right? We really haven't fleshed out what best practices are. So focus on the why, focus on what seems to be the right way, and last thing, never, ever, ever refuse a refund. Never refuse a refund. If you want to certainly be viewed as a security, refusing any refund is one of the best ways to do that, right?
Right.
Well.
And what % of your holders are outside the U.S. that you know of, say?
I have no way of knowing that.
But you went to 46 countries, so you're obviously marketing.
Yeah.
Around
I mean,
world.
we did KYC and AML. KYC, for those that don't know, is know your customer, and AML is anti-money laundering. We did KYC and AML checks on every single token purchaser. Which is,
wow.
Yeah, about 7,400 of them in a matter of a month. Not an easy thing to do because we had to do each of those.
You did it right.
Automated.
The legal thing was.
Oh yeah.
You followed the rules.
Yeah, and wait a couple of months. Right. We'll be one of the few left, I'm sure.
Yeah. So Robert Wensley, who's the CEO of DataBook, he's blockchain related, very interesting company. He's a former presenter. He had a question. He commented that we're seeing more transparency in the marketplace and innovation, and he wanted to know what your view is on trends in the ICO market for this coming year.
Trends in the ICO market.
Because 2 years ago, it's been a hockey stick, right?
Yeah.
Now you got thousands coming out.
Well, so
tens of thousands that want to come out.
Yeah,
so
I think we had 1,700 in the last 6 months or so.
Right.
When we started doing this, it was March, and there were 5.
Wow.
Yeah, 5 I think that existed. In fact, when I went to Cooley to ask Cooley for help, they said, "What is that?"
Right.
Now they're the.
As a side note, he really is an expert. He was in Davos, and how many speeches have you given in the last 12 months on blockchain?
107 conferences and speeches.
107 speeches. He's a real pioneer, so we're really blessed to have you today.
Thank you.
Your thoughts on the future for this kind of offering?
So if I'm going to speculate on where we're going,
counsel, it's just a speculation. Opinions are his own.
Market trends, right? But if I'm going to speculate on where we're going, I think it's important to harp back on where industries have been in the past.
Right.
So you can look at just about every industry and realize that the protocols, the infrastructure has always taken the early lead, right? Even the last big industry, the internet, right? The protocols, the fiber, the ground layers, the cell towers, all of that took the early lead, right? Mm-hmm. But they don't have it now. Maybe 6% of the market overall, globally. Really, the main value, the big sort of push the entire market cap is always transaction of the assets, regardless what the asset is. Right now, for the internet, it's data, right? We haven't gotten to an asset side for cryptocurrency and blockchain. We're still really focusing on and emphasizing on the protocols. I think that we're going to see a large sort of regression away from the protocols here going forward. It's still important for them to exist. They're not going to be going anywhere, I'm sure. Bitcoin and Ethereum I'm sure aren't going anywhere. But I think it's time probably, I would predict that the asset-backed currencies are going to be coming in. And I think that's probably the best vehicle for very streamlined regulation long term. I think it's a pretty simple thing to register, especially internationally. So that's where I think we're going. Anything that's going to be asset-backed. Utility is still very important, but I would predict that the utility aspect, that loophole will probably be closed soon.
Got it. Oh, that's very interesting. So we have I have one final question because we got to stay on our schedule here. But where do you see the company in 5 years? You have some grand ambitions. This guy is not a small thinker by any means. Where do you see the company in terms of your impact on intellectual property around the world? Where you think people are going to be buying and selling and putting assets into the platform, et cetera?
Sure.
Or are you beyond that even?
Well, so I want to specify that the company, the for-profit entity, really manages the product, creates the product, all of that, right? There's a foundation that manages the transactions of the IP, the cryptocurrency, and the blockchain. So I'm guessing you're asking probably about both. The company, I'm obviously hoping to expand quite a bit. I think that we'll be pushing into other markets. We'll see Venn diagram searching and search engines and many other use cases, whether it be cars and CarMax or recipes or diets or whatever else. Even things like Pinterest could really use a Venn diagram search. On the foundation side, in 5 years, I think we could probably overthrow just about all fiat. I think that currency itself, the recognition of value is much more intrinsic than what we give it credit for right now. And I think it's probably going to go back to its roots and be much more about bartering and getting value for having actual societal contribution. God forbid we contribute to the world, we get something back, and we can actually live on that. That sounds like the right system.
Wow. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank you.
your vision.
Thank you.
And let's give it up.